on the first round of voting here anyway, to take these stopgap, bubble gum, and the damn measures. In good conscience, I can't do it. When we finally come to a compromise, I'm going to support whatever the majority of the board wants to do here, putting forth for consideration to town meeting and in an override what we have to do in order to close the budget gap and restore most of this period. I agree, we get there at least to step 2, and we should do 3 or 4, but at least to step 2. We need to get kids back in school. And I don't fault the school committee or the administration for not saying that getting the Wednesdays is not #1 priority, because it's not. I think they made some compelling arguments as to where the first dollars have to go, and it's not there. And that's unfortunate. Therefore, we have to make some other choices on the general government side in order to support that. So that addresses the 708 and some others. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You know, you had a set of interesting proposals there, none of which were actually quantified. You said, let's do things, let's do things. What do you have in mind to do? But don't tell me, because I'm sure it's just like, wow, bizarre, okay? The fact of the matter is there's 708,000 here on the table, okay? And I'm in favor, okay? It is not one-time adjustments. They are adjustments that are carry over into the next year. Some of them are one-year adjustments, as every budget has one-year adjustments in them, and every adjustment has other years, okay? The $100,000 carries over to next year from the ambulance, the cell tower carries over to the other year, next year, the sanitation carries over to the next year, okay? The police and fire overtime theoretically carries to the next year. Most of these adjustments are long-term adjustments. They're not one-time things. Okay, the debt exclusion, that's what people are doing all over the state. How are people getting by? They're getting by using reserves. You've heard all about talk about rainy day funds. That's how people are getting through hard times. Towns are getting through hard times. So I'm in favor of this budget because it uses new revenue. Talk about new revenue. There's new revenue here. Okay, it talks about new revenue. It talks about real cuts. Okay, we started off cutting $184,000 out of the budget before we even got here. Okay, so $184,000 already cut from the town side. Then there's $708,000 here. Okay, I've heard a lot of talk about, I got to tell you, okay, I've heard a lot of talk about feeling the pain. Everybody's in pain. There's no one in this town not in pain. And if you don't believe that, you should talk to them. Everybody's in pain. It's hard times. Okay, it is difficult. Okay, nobody's thrilled at what's going on, okay? That being said, we need to find a way to work with what we've got, okay? Are you going to get an override? How many of you think you're going to get an override? Okay, I don't know if you're going to get an override, okay? But you've got to work with what you've got here, okay? To me, okay, the idea of laying off more people, okay, is offensive to me, especially when there are other options. These are all viable options. Trash, in my view, should pay for itself. It should pay for itself. Now, Joe's idea that seniors and low users should be somehow made fair, I agree with. But that can be worked out. We can find some way to redistribute the money so that in such a way that there be some fair allocation. That's down the road, okay, to work out. But most of these adjustments are reasonable adjustments, okay, and the money's got to come from somewhere. Where do you think the money's going to come? When we talk about laying, I got to say one more thing. When we talk about laying off people in the town side, okay, what is not revealed to people, what you think about is you think about school and town, okay? The school employees make up nearly 70% of total employees. 70% of total employees. Okay? That means the town side is only 30% employees. When you cut an equivalent amount of town side employees as you cut on the school side, okay, you are cutting half the workforce. Okay? Now, I'm not telling you, I'm just telling you, you need to think about this in terms of what it really is, and not in terms of the language of the speech writing. Okay? It is cutting. When you talk, we're not there yet, but when you talk about cutting the town clerk, there are only 3 people in the town clerk's office. When you talk about cutting HR, you're talking about cutting 100% of the HR staff. Any of you work for a company that has no HR people? So it's not that we shouldn't do these things, it's that we need to think about them and look at them. But this is the starting point, and it's, to me, it's all good adjustments. It's $700,000 that we give to the schools that are good things. I'm in favor of doing this, and then we can talk about the rest.
I think, Steve, that the one thing that I'm interested in doing, and I'll use everybody I think has a copy of this, the superintendent's pyramid, is that what I wanted to do was to get, before we can talk about providing additional resources and what we do to get the money, we got to get the status quo budget resolved. And the 708 was the first step. And I would, at this point, accept a motion from somebody to...
You already got a consensus. You already got a consensus, and I agree with the consensus.
Okay.
So,
Well, let's vote it in. I move that we accept the proposal of $708,000 added to the proposed budget.
As funded as described.
As funded as
Where
described.
second?
I'll second it so that we look good with that. We're going to get along.
Okay. I have a motion and second. Any other board member have a comment before I talk about this?
Yes, if I may. For the reason I stated, and Mr. Dardino brought up a good point, and if I had it in front of me and saw where it could be worked out with seniors and low users would somehow not be affected by this, I would be in favor of this. But for that reason, I cannot support that because that's not in front of me. I am in favor of the 708, but not with that stipulation in there. If I had that in front of me and I saw how the breakdown was going to be, I would be totally in favor. I just want to let you know why I'm voting no.
Okay. Michael, you have any comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Secretary records a vote of 4 to 1, Mr. Dino.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
the Finance Committee supports the proposals on the current slide by a 6-0 vote taken last Monday. There are some concerns about money for cell salaries, which must be voted by town meeting this spring. Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. Okay. Next slide, Mrs. Bailey. Thank you. Okay. Now, to close the budget, the gap was 946. We just approved the 708, 975. The school department, I believe, has voted in the $35,000. Basically, what they're voting is to reduce their budget by $35,000 and to fund it, fund the budget from their athletic revolving. That piece of it. Reduce the vocational school assessment. We have double-checked that number, and at this point, this is the best information we have. Mr.
Yes, that's correct.
Sony, you would confirm that? Yes. The septic loan account through the general fund is money that's there that we have found, and it's appropriate that we use it. The additional lottery money, you've heard from Mr. Representative Jones this evening, and by voting that, we will have closed the status quo budget gap. So I would, at this point, if there's any further discussion on the floor, I will entertain a motion.
I move that we approve the amount of money that gets us to the status quo.
Motion made by Mr. Gardino, seconded by Mr. Harris. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Next. I want to take a minute here to just go over this again. The excess status quo budget, Mr. Belconis, you want to use that money for
We've made other adjustments, so if you just proceed with the slide as you've got it laid out with the dollar amounts, we can accommodate the additional requests.
Okay.
So you don't need the 25?
We've made other adjustments in the budget that we'll bring up later, much later in the evening, that do not affect the school department, they affect some small dollars.
Nice job, Mr. Nice job.
Okay. Removing the small gap from the town $85,200. Mr. Balakonis, these kinds of items, right, we can afford to wait until October to purchase?
I would suggest that, with the exception of the police cruiser, we've moved the police cruiser over to be funded in free cash and capital. The other items can wait until October, but they will be given priority over all other items at
But
that time.
the police cruiser is not part of that 85,000, right? Yes or no?
No, it's not part of that 85,000.
And then on the school department, I'll ask the question again, because I know this has an impact on the textbook acquisitions. Can you live with $70,000 in April and the balance in October for the textbook acquisitions?
The answer is yes.
And by the way, it's not, most of that money is other than the textbooks, right? And on the health insurance, Mr. Balakonis, we feel comfortable that we will do no worse than the 12% at this point, although it's still an unknown.
That's correct. I think you hit the nail on the head. It's an unknown, but there is logic in terms of how we got to 12%, as you pointed out earlier this evening.
And if there were additional savings that we find out about before town meeting, what would we do? What would
We'll
be our-
sit down and discuss distribution of those monies, so that those don't necessarily have a slot at this time.
So I bring this point up because I don't know, for those of you that attended last April's town meeting, we actually had you're going to get a printed warrant that's going to basically represent what's voted on tonight. But if there are changes in revenue, and the one unknown still is the health insurance, there will be an adjustment sheet handed out at town meeting to explain the differences. With that, if we go forward and approve all of these items, we would be providing to the school budget an additional $375,000, almost $376,000. And if I look at the superintendent's permit again, that would at least get us through his priority one change. Now this is if this money would be available, right? It doesn't mean that an override question wouldn't be asked, but the override question would be adjusted down to the amount that was given to the school department. It might be adjusted up by supplementing things that we may vote tonight to take out of the town budget. For example, if we cut positions, we may elect to put those back in the override budget. And we would hope that we would get the same level of support from the community, right, with the town cuts being put back in as an override.
I move, as your children, well, fight for that. I'm pretty sure you will do that.
Okay, so this Mrs. Bailey.
Two things. First, I would like to echo that I think the people here supporting schools tonight support the community as a whole and would absolutely support an override for the community, no matter which department it's in, that we don't. I have a question to put a damper on that before we get too excited about the potential of meeting priority one. 7.5 positions, does that include 7.5 times 10,300 for benefits? So that's $75,000.
So it doesn't quite make the number. Mr. Balakonis.
The impact of health insurance on 8 employees, because of 0.5 employees entitled to health insurance, is $82,800. So what I would suggest to you is out of the $375,000, $82,800 of that should be earmarked for the employee benefits budget, because we have to pay for the cost of insuring our employees.
By the way, just a back of the envelope number, if the entire school budget request, whether it's an override or whether it's funded